lot more to this life than just this life. The exact nature of it differs between belief systems, but broadly it says that when you die, your soul, or something equivalent to your soul, will pass over into a new physical body. The body you have right now won't last forever, but the inner essence of your being will. For many, it's a fundamental aspect of reality, of spirituality, and of how the universe really works. The word itself, reincarnation, is rooted in Latin and translates as entering the flesh again. Some refer to it as transmigration. A variation in ancient Greece was known as metempsychosis, while some describe it as a rebirth. For many, reincarnation is a cyclical and eternal phenomenon. It happens over and over again, potentially forever. In some versions, a soul can be reborn into the body of another human being, but also into an animal, a plant, or even into some kind of transcendental figure. In both Buddhism and Hinduism, two of the most widely followed religions where reincarnation is key, it's a process deeply interwoven with the concept of karma, the idea being that positive thoughts and actions will breed positive karma, which will ensure a favorable outcome when you're reborn into your next life. For believers, the endless cycle of reincarnation is also known as samsara, which roughly translates to mean a wandering world. As such, the ultimate end goal is to break free of samsara in order to achieve absolute self-knowledge, enlightenment, and liberation, the state of being that Buddhists refer to as nirvana. It's not as though reincarnation is especially forgiving, however. And in fact, one often vital part is the long and continued experience of suffering. In Buddhism, the Bhava Chakra, or Wheel of Life, is a central visual representation of samsara, and is effectively what followers must break free from to reach nirvana. The wheel is in part divided into 6 sections or realms, and many of those realms are steeped in suffering. Physical pain, mental anguish, social injustice. These all form part of the gauntlet that a reincarnated soul must run, time and time again. A similar feeling is held by other groups in history too, such as the Orphics. Orphism is a religion dating back to ancient Greece, where reincarnation is again painted as more like a punishment than a reward. The Orphics believe that when you die, you either ascended to godliness or were cast back down to earth via reincarnation. What's disturbing is that some of the claimed physical evidence we have for reincarnation also implies a great deal of suffering in terms of whatever came before this life that we're all living right now. Dr. Jim B. Tucker is a child psychiatrist at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, but he's also the director of the same university's Division of Perceptual Studies, a branch dedicated to rigorously evaluating empirical evidence to suggest that consciousness survives death and that mind and brain are distinct and separable. Through his work with the division and through publishing various key texts, Dr. Tucker has become a world authority on children who remember their past lives. That is, children who say or do things that indicate that something has been carried over from before to now. They might recognize someone they've never met before, speak about an event they can't possibly have known about because it happened before they were born, or even directly reference how it was that they last died. In some cases, there are even reports of physical birthmarks that correspond with the claims that are made. And very often, particularly with regards to the past death, those claims involve some kind of violent injury or fatal accident. One of Dr. Tucker's most high-profile cases first made the news in the mid-2010s. Ryan, an American boy from the Midwest, claimed to have once been an actor in 1930s Hollywood. His mother tracked her son's story as he gave out more and more details over a short period of time. Ryan remembered also working as an agent and as a dancer in New York. He recalled having 3 sons, and he remembered variously small details, including names of friends and significant addresses. Reacting to the snippets of information that Ryan had given her, his mother reportedly bought books filled with photos of 1930s Hollywood. They looked through them together until Ryan found a photo that he claimed was of himself working as an extra, and of another man named George. The image really was of a George, an actor at the time called George Raft, and many of Ryan's other claims could also be corroborated. Dr. Tucker and Ryan's family researched some more until it was discovered that the extra he claimed he was a man named Martin, otherwise known as Marty. Marty had been a bit part actor, and then a dancer, and then an agent. He also did have 3 sons. According to numerous interviews given by Dr. Tucker, Ryan is hardly on his own. There are thousands of cases just like his, and that's not including the ones that are never properly studied. Unsurprisingly, there is something of a taboo around past life remembrance. Many parents, understandably, don't want their children to have inherited memories of trauma. And as Dr. Tucker's studies reveal that the average age of death in the past life is just 28, and that almost 3/4 of the cases involve a violent, frightening, or unnatural death, it's clear that recalling this kind of information really could be traumatic. Even without that, though, it could also be true that many parents may not even register that the make-believe stories their children recall could actually be grounded in real-life historical events. As to how it all happens, Dr. Tucker has before spoken of a potential link with our growing understanding of quantum mechanics. Today, we know that if you travel deep enough down into something, to the subatomic level and beyond, then the laws of physics begin to fall apart. The physicality of anything doesn't truly exist until that thing is observed. And many argue that this could be the basis of the separation of brain and mind, of body and consciousness. The underlying point being that perhaps consciousness doesn't need the brain, and so can continue long after the brain is dead. Again, this is something that Dr. Tucker, as director of the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, has long campaigned for, that consciousness differs from our physical selves. Past life regression, or past life hypnosis, is generally regarded as pseudoscience. While there have been hundreds of claims made by those who have undergone it, that their past lives have been variously revealed to them, there are precious few mainstream academics that subscribe to any perceived recollections being genuine. Importantly, however, with most cases involving children, there is no hypnosis needed, and usually very little by way of context to influence anything that a child might say. In terms of remembering past lives, this is about as close to the real deal as we're ever likely to get. But what's your verdict? Could it really be true that some part of us, the soul to some, will one day continue on inside another body? Or are you unconvinced that that kind of transcendence could ever really happen? Let us know in the comments. The traditional ideas on reincarnation have been revisited and rewritten in recent years, too. We took a closer look at The Egg, a short story published online by the author Andy Weir in 2009. That episode will follow on directly from this right now, so be sure to keep the video running. Because between the world's religions, the research of those like Dr. Tucker, and the creative minds of those like Andy Weir, that's why Reincarnation, a short story written in 2009 by the US novelist Andy Weir. Weir is also known for The Martian, which was in 2015 adapted into a Hollywood movie starring Matt Damon. But perhaps The Egg is what will truly enshrine him in the annals of theoretical science and philosophy. Weir himself has expressed some surprise at the enthusiasm shown for his egg idea, which he says took him less than an hour to jot down before posting to an online forum. But really, in a modern world where a meaning for life perhaps feels more and more difficult to understand, maybe it's not so surprising that the egg should catch on. So what actually happens in the story? Weir's main character is known simply as You, and quickly you meet God, who's referred to as Me. What follows is essentially a conversation between you and God then, through which the true nature of reality is revealed. At the beginning, the bad news is that you've just died in a car crash. God explains this to you, but also explains that you'll soon be reincarnated as somebody different, as a young Chinese girl alive almost 1,500 years ago. God further reveals that this isn't your first reincarnation either. Far from it. You've actually been brought back countless times before, into countless different bodies, living in all earthly locations at all times in the past, present, and future. You then muse over the fact that this means you were once the likes of Abraham Lincoln, Adolf Hitler, and even Jesus Christ. While God reminds you that you've also been everyone else too, including Lincoln's assassin, Hitler's victims, and Jesus's followers. God continues, explaining further that, in fact, the universe was made for you, as a kind of structure through which you could live every human life possible. The realization is that now, and actually always, you are, or have been, so much more than just the person who died in the car crash at the apparent beginning. Rather, you are everyone. Everyone that's been, and everyone that will be. Essentially, the universe is for you. Finally, God explains what the thinking behind all of this is. The idea is that through being everyone, you would learn that everything you do to yourself. Every time you hurt someone, you hurt yourself. Every time you help someone, you help yourself. Every time you've been kind or mean, happy or sad, selfish or selfless, you're actually being all of those things as everyone. Every human experience that ever was or will be is your experience. And when you've lived every human life possible, today and in history and in the future, then, so the story says, you will become a god just like the one you're currently talking to. Only then will you have infinite wisdom of what it really means to live. And so the story ends. For the reader, there's perhaps a clear moral message here, as it's implied that you should always try to think, act, and be your best side. Not just because it's in your best interest, but because it simply is you. Everything is you. So would you rather everything was good or bad? However, perversely, the story also relies on the realization that all bad people are essentially your responsibility too. This is a wide-open thought experiment then, with endless conclusions that could be reached. Meanwhile, the entire thing doubles up as a journey toward your ultimate enlightenment and your ascension to God status. This is how Weir pitches the universe as an egg, because it's where you grow and develop until you reach that stage. There are some schools of philosophical and scientific thought that this story could fall into, or at least that it blurs boundaries with. Eternalism is a philosophy of time wherein the flow of time doesn't really exist. Instead of the universe, your life and everything else moving through time, with the past behind it, the present always here, and the future to come. Eternalism says that all of those states of time are real together. Time is more a box to open up and look into, rather than a one-way road down which to travel. In Weir's story, this is one of the first major revelations for you, the main character. When you reincarnate in China 1500 years ago, it's not exactly as if you'll have traveled back in time. It's more like you'll have opened the book of time at a different page. Next, there's the theory of open individualism, another key concept in The Egg. Broadly, this is the idea that you are everyone, or that everyone is you. There have been many variations to it coined over recent decades, but again, it usually relies on the dismantling of the flow or passage of time. Time, as it's commonly understood, doesn't really exist for the open individual, or how else could it be that you could be anyone else at all? Instead, and by some understanding of it, it might be said that you, yourself, exists like a sheen over the world, applying itself to all, or that every apparent individual person is in fact linked simply by their shared experience of being here. It might feel as though all of us are different, but actually we're not at all. At the most fundamental layer, we're the same, literally the same. Theories of open individualism don't usually lead to the final point of Weir's story, however, when it's explained to you by God that once you've lived as everyone, you too will become a god. Here, the egg takes a more theological turn, with similar concepts appearing across most major religions, but especially in Hinduism. While most religions have some form of God the Creator, an all-seeing, all-powerful entity, in Hinduism there's the Brahman. This is a kind of topmost metaphysical layer that rests over everything else, including Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the trinity of supreme Hindu gods. The Brahman is unsurpassable. It's the ultimate truth of all things. It never changes, can never be changed, and represents the ultimate reality in Hindu thought. One reading of Weir's story could perhaps cast the god figure within it as something close to the Brahman, although the implication is that even it exists somewhere else. So Weir doesn't quite tie up reality in exactly the same way. But what's your verdict? Do you subscribe to the egg theory? Would you like to, but can't quite bring yourself to accept it? Of course, it's not as though this is something that could ever provide proof of itself. It's an idea proposed by Weir, and a blending of various other approaches to life as well. Similarly, there are perhaps some signs of us building in some aspects of the egg with regard to our future lives as we currently appreciate them. The hive mind, for example, is an often cited advanced technology that human society could be moving towards. A unifying something that enables us all to think, understand, and perhaps even feel the same things. Usually it's pitched as though it's a path towards ultimate efficiency, but could it also lead to a greater wisdom and effectively fast-track us, you, me, toward the egg's endpoint, toward living every human life possible, Or would a hive mind actually take us further away from that total truth? When it comes to future technology like that, it's easy to steer ourselves into an early dystopia. But really, and while interpretations obviously differ, that's probably not the main takeaway from the egg theory. Instead, it's an idea more about the boundless possibilities for life, and it's a repitching of the universe with you at the heart of it. But not you, not exactly. Because if the egg rings true, then you are me, and I am them, and they are us. You, me, he, she, and they are growing as one. And there's literally all of time in the past, present, and future in which to do so.